Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, I would like to now invite my panelists in the first session. So, first, Mr. Yerzhan Ashikbayev, the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Mr. Sayed Hatibzadeh, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and President of the Institute for Political and International Studies of the MFA of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Mr. Joshua Lincoln, Senior Fellow of the Center for International Law and Governance at the Fletcher School, Tufts University, and Visiting Fellow of Kellogg College, University of Oxford. Thank you very much. Mr. Li Yongshuan, Head of the Scientific Council of the Institute for the Social Development of Europe and Asia, Development Research Center of the State Council of the Republic of China. And Mr. Charles McLean, Founder and Managing Director of Borderless Consulting Group. Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to this important session. There is a kind of echo. Session on multilateralism at Crossroads, reforming global governance in a divided world. It is a great honor and privilege to moderate this timely and vital conversation today. For nearly 8 decades, multilateral institutions have served as the backbone of our collective efforts to maintain peace, promote development, and uphold international norms. From the United Nations to regional organizations, these frameworks have helped prevent conflict, foster cooperation, and respond to global challenges. Yet today, we find ourselves at a critical juncture. The world is undergoing profound transformations. Geopolitical rivalries are intensifying, trust among nations is frying, and also from climate change to pandemics, from digital governance to economic inequality, the challenges we face are increasingly complex, transnational, and urgent. This session is an invitation to reflect constructively on the state of global governance. What have we learned from the successes and shortcomings of our institutions? How can we adapt and reform them to meet the demands of a rapidly changing world? We are fortunate to have with us a distinguished panel of thought leaders and practitioners who bring deep insights and diverse perspectives to these questions. I'm looking forward to a very rich and forward-looking discussion. So thank you very much, and let us begin. Our first speaker is Mr. Yerzhan Ashikbayev, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan. First, sir, allow me to congratulate you on your appointment. Mr. Ashikbayev has played a central role in shaping Kazakhstan's foreign policy, serving in multiple institutions, multiple government positions, with his previous post as the ambassador of the Republic of Kazakhstan to the United States. I would like to invite you to the floor, Mr. Ashikbayev. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Well, good morning, distinguished guests, partners of the forum, ladies and gentlemen. It's my profound pleasure to address such a distinct audience today, and thank you for being here today in Astana. So, Astana Think Tank Forum is taking place in our beautiful capital for the second time, and my very own Ministry for Foreign Affairs is very much pleased to be part of these intellectual discussions that definitely enrich our strategic thinking. As all the previous speakers spoke, we're living in an era of profound change. A world that until recently seemed interconnected and predictable is rapidly becoming polarized. I would say one of the very acute issues is a breakdown of trust and resurgence of bloc-based thinking. And this definitely undermines the foundations of the international system built on cooperation, dialogue, and shared values. In these challenging circumstances, the formation of a constructive consensus and the strengthening of multilateralism become essential, as responsibility for maintaining a stable and just world order falls on a wider circle of international players. So as President of Kazakhstan, His Excellency Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said it, middle powers are increasingly emerging as key actors in ensuring stability, peace and development not only in their respective regions but also beyond. They can act as mediators, offering dialogue and cooperative platforms where the ambitions and interests of global players collide. The new role of this group of countries may be based on instruments of unilateral coalitions and partnerships that will enable practical results. And the trend is already evident in several cases. I would argue that the recent Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit became possible not only to the personal efforts of President Trump, but also of a number of middle powers. Meaningful progress was also achieved in the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which at its early stages included a meeting in Almaty. That was the process backed and supported by Kazakhstan that eventually led to the initialing a peace treaty on August 8th this year in Washington. Such achievements were made possible largely because the formats that led to them remain informal and non-ideologized, enabling states to pursue pragmatic solutions. These, I would say, mark a new trend in the evolution of multilateralism, one that avoids rigid institutional frameworks. The current global situation presents not only challenges but also new opportunities, and we, through this type of intellectual discussions, need to find ways how to make use of those new opportunities. So while new and flexible formats of international engagements are gaining prominence, traditional and universal institutions and platforms continue to play a pivotal role in global affairs. These institutions, nonetheless, must also evolve in response to the complex realities and the challenges of the 21st century. And in this regard, the reform of the United Nations appears both necessary and inevitable, while its fundamental responsibility for maintaining international peace and security must remain steadfast. As President Tokayev noted in his speech at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly this past September, restoring a reliable global security architecture must remain a top priority for the international community. And President Tokayev outlined key initiatives that guide Kazakhstan in these new realities. Firstly, we support reform of the UN Security Council, expanding and ensuring more equitable representation of states from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, strengthening the role of middle powers as bridges of trust and anchors of stability. Second, we advocate for unwavering adherence to the Charter and strengthening of UN institutions, adapting its architecture to meet modern challenges rather than simply preserving outdated procedures. The fundamental principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and peaceful settlement of disputes must be strictly observed, without exceptions. Thirdly, we call for the resumption of the high-level dialogue between nuclear powers and the intensification of multilateral actions aimed at significantly reducing the threat of weapons of mass destruction. And Kazakhstan is ready to contribute to those efforts and make the creation of a world without nuclear weapons or the threat of nuclear annihilation the main goal of humanity in the 21st century. We're also promoting the creation of International Agency for Biological Security under the auspices of the United Nations to prevent the devastating consequences of man-made pandemics and bioterrorism on a global stage. The opening of the UN Regional Center for Sustainable Development Goals for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty reflects our country's commitment to actively promote the implementation of Universal 2030 SDG agenda at both national and regional levels. The center will serve as a platform for strengthening cooperation between countries in the region in addressing pressing social, economic, and environmental challenges. One of Kazakhstan's key international contributions was the establishment of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, or CICA. And the primary goal of the 28 CICA member states, covering 90% of Asia's territory, is to create a security and cooperation architecture in Asia based on the principles of the UN Charter and international law. The restoration of the global security architecture should also be facilitated by the development of comprehensive cooperation within Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Astana supports multilateral efforts to form a common and indivisible Euro-Atlantic and Eurasian security community. In our view, new security architecture cannot be built solely on institutional reforms. It requires the fundamental principle of reaffirming commitment to the principles of multilateralism and the rule of law by all member states. We advocate for giving the regional security dimension a more significant status in the global governance system. The new security architecture must be built from the bottom up, from regional resilience to global peace. In the context of rapid technological progress, security challenges are taking on new and complex dimensions. One such challenge is the pressing need to establish common international frameworks for the regulation of artificial intelligence. Kazakhstan reaffirms its commitment to actively engage in the UN-led global dialogue on AI, which seeks to coordinate global approaches and regulatory standards in this field, while ensuring that the interests of all humankind are duly taken into account. And we believe that access to AI must be fair, open, and non-discriminatory. This is not simply a question of technological capabilities. It's about equal opportunity, digital sovereignty of states, and the equitable participation of all countries in shaping the future of the globe. And Kazakhstan is making a significant contribution to the global climate agenda. Effective climate policy will be facilitated by the upcoming Regional Climate Summit in Astana in 2026, which will serve as a platform for coordinating strategies among Central Asian countries and developing collective solutions. Astana also calls for increased international engagement in addressing environmental issues and preserving the water resources of the Aral and Caspian Seas. We are strongly committed to achieving a carbon-neutral economy by 2060. We are taking a pragmatic approach to this goal, prioritizing economic diversification and balanced energy policy. While expanding the use of renewable energy sources, we will also continue to develop traditional energy sectors that are vital for national growth and energy security. This measured and realistic strategy will enable us to reach carbon neutrality while preserving economic stability and sustainability. Dear participants, in the 21st century, I would like now to turn to our own region, Central Asia. So the Central Asian region is once again becoming a vital region in the world, reclaiming its role it once played along the Great Silk Road for centuries. So thanks to the efforts of our head of state and responsiveness and empathy of our partners, the international standing of Central Asia has strengthened. CA+ formats with China, Russia, European Union, the United States, Germany, Italy, India, Gulf cooperation countries, South Korea, Japan, the OSCE, and others are actively developing. We are creating a new economic foundation for multilateral cooperation in Central Asia, and by the way, this forum is yet another reflection of this multilateral cooperation within Central Asia. The region boasts a market of 80 million people and abundant natural resources. Combined GDP of Central Asia is something roughly equal to $500 billion, with trade, intra-regional trade exceeding 10 billion. Large infrastructure and transport projects are emerging as new growth areas, and good example of mutually beneficial cooperation include the Kambara-Da hydroelectric power station in Kyrgyzstan or the Ragun hydroelectric power station in Tajikistan, and many others. The further development of the region's transit and transport potential plays a vital role in reinforcing unity and enhancing connectivity across Central Asia and beyond. The region is emerging as a strategic logistics hub linking Asia and Europe, and today Kazakhstan alone accounts for over 80% of all overland freight shipment from China to Europe. So we attach huge paramount importance to strengthening transcontinental connectivity and unlocking the competitive advantages of Central Asia as a whole. So we are talking about developing such projects as Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Global Gateway, all of which engage countries of the region and its international partners. So the growing transport interconnectivity of Central Asia represents not only an economic milestone, but also a collective contribution to addressing such issues as resilience of supply chains, but also global stability and mutual trust. It embodies our vision for region's further development, building win-win relations in Eurasia while creating a synergy of interests between regional and foreign players. I'm about to finish, but let me dwell on a couple of other issues. So current times demand unity, political will, and decisive action to preserve peace and global civilization. We all do understand that without serious constructive dialogue among all parties, global stability and security cannot be ensured. Sanctions and geopolitical confrontation cause serious damage not only to those involved in the conflicts, but also negatively impact third countries and global economy overall. In these circumstances, the need to foster mutual understanding and strengthen trust between states becomes particularly urgent. And Kazakhstan is fully committed to contributing to addressing those challenges. And I should reinforce the message by Mr. Mirzagaliev that the expert community is a backbone of shaping that the future we want to live in. And this is the core value and principal goal of this Astana think tank forum. With this, let me wish you the best possible discussions and enjoy your time in Astana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashikbayev. You touched upon many different things, but I would highlight maybe three of them. The one is really you emphasize the role of middle powers of countries like Kazakhstan, and also as well as the other countries in reaching consensus, in reaching peacemaking, and also promoting multilateralism. Based on recent examples, we clearly see that. And the second is, you mentioned about the role of UN, multilateral institutions. And as we are commemorating the 80th anniversary of the United Nations this year in October, this is also an opportunity for all of us to reflect on lessons learned and also looking ahead for next 80 years how this organization should look like. So thank you very much for mentioning about the UN, and also the Kazakhstan's sharing the Kazakhstan's position vis-a-vis to UN reforms. The third is also, you mentioned about the artificial intelligence, what Kazakhstan is also contributing to promote this important tool, but as well as also mentioning the equal access. This is really important because, again, with artificial intelligence, we can make it useful for economic growth, but the access should be equal to everyone. And last but not least, it's my favorite topic about the Regional Ecological Summit, because having such regional events and regional dialogue, it also contributes to promoting multilateralism. So thank you very much. So now it's my honor to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Sayed Khatibzadeh, the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran and also President of the Institute for Political and International Studies. With a distinguished diplomatic career spanning over 2 decades, Mr. Khatibzadeh has served in key roles, including ambassador to Croatia, foreign ministry spokesperson, and senior advisor to the foreign minister. Mr. Khatibzadeh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you, organizer, for inviting me and for organizing also this very timely and important gathering among foreign policy decision makers and decision shapers. And thank you to also Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan for inviting us to be here and inviting me to be here. I'll try to be brief to give more opportunity for exchange, if there is any chance of that. So I would like to focus on few important concepts which is very much we are observing and needs to be on our focus. We are living history. I'm sure that more or less most of you are observing what is happening in international politics, including what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Eurasia, what is happening in Afghanistan, in the Persian Gulf, what is happening in Latin America, in some parts of Africa. So as we are all watching, we are living history. And contradictory trends is happening at the international level. If just you look at these contradictory trends, you can understand to what extent the level of unpredictability is so high. To the extent that you can wake up in the morning and see something that was 100%, 180% different from what you expected. These contradictory trends are very much haunting the international politics as we are watching right now. While there is a debate about peace, at the same time we are seeing actions in favor of hegemony and war. Barely you could imagine that series of war happening in such a short period of time. More than 70,000 people have been slaughtered just in this small area of Gaza. What is happening in Eurasia right now between Russia and Ukraine? What is happening in some parts of Africa? And also the intense tension in Latin America, in Venezuela and other places. So the key question is right now is that what is the prevailing trend right now? Is it a status quo or is it revisionism? You remember in 2017, in the first President Trump's administration, they published a national security document, 2017, in which they called Russia and China a revisionist state. Now you just look at what is happening. Who is the revisionist state? Who is just revisiting all the international order and all international norms? Our Madam Chair is from the UN institution. You remember that the representative of Israel went to the podium in the UN and shred the UN Charter in front of all the cameras. You remember that? So that was a very telling moment that there is a trend that there are those who are trying to revisit the international order. And the very painful departure was the painful departure from international law, international relations based on law or law-based international order to a new order that was not based on law. It was order-based international. politics. So what we are seeing right now is this weakening of international institutions, including UN. But it is not about the UN institutions which have been under danger, which is very, very important, but also it is about the principles of international law, which is under danger. Very principles of national sovereignty, very principles of territorial integrity, very principles of humanitarian law. As you are seeing, the national sovereignty of other countries and territorial integrity have been very much violated, and this is exactly what happened against Iran. When Israelis and Americans started aggression on Iran, it was not based on a mandate. It was not based on a UN decision. It was not based on any international law. It was not even based on real concerns or tension. It was just a merely desire on the other side to exercise its hegemony. And this is another contradictory trend. We are at peace or we are at hegemony. So is it peace through strength or is it hegemony through use of naked force? What we are seeing right now at the international level is very much alarming. Few weeks ago, Peace Index published a very important report. There are reports that just suggesting that 11% of the world GDP now is allocated to military. The military expenditure has reached to the unprecedented level of 11% of average GDP of the world. What does it mean? It means that these are not numbers that suggesting that we are at peace. And this is why that we have very much get to this point that everybody should work to just protect the very basic of international law, which is the achievement of 100 years and decades of human achievement. This sort of ad hocism that we are seeing right now, opportunistic alliances that we are seeing right now, these are against the very international norms and values that we were stick to. And now it is why that global south is very important. I cannot go into more details about this transformation and transition in international politics. My colleague talked about that in technology, in different things, but also it is very important in the multipolarity that we are seeing in the world right now. The global south is very important, what we are seeing from Shanghai, BRICS. And these are blocks that can alternatively tell us that we can stick to international norms that is very much basic of international politics that we used to work with. Revisionism should not be the prevailing trend in international politics, and we have all to work to bring peace. On Central Asia, on Caucasus, on South Caucasus, there are very promising trends which is happening between Azerbaijan and Armenia, between also different countries in the littoral state of the Caspian Sea. Also what is happening in the Persian Gulf in terms of rapprochement. All of these are promising, but again, we are also seeing alarming security issues. What is also happening in Afghanistan, or what was the message coming from Washington about Afghanistan, about the Bagram bases and other things also are very much alarming. I would like to end with this statement, and if there is any chance, I would be more than happy to talk about Iran's foreign policy vis-a-vis all these issues. I would like to end with this statement that we should avoid to get into an endless war and the situation which happened during the First and Second World War. All we have to get together to work on an inclusive arrangement, regional and international. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hatibzadeh. Two things, I would like to highlight based on your intervention. The first is, as you spoke about international law, so it's important to abide by the principles of international law, humanitarian law, and also that respecting territorial integrity. The second is also you highlighted the importance of Global South, because more and more the Global South countries are actively and meaningfully participating in global dialogues. So these two things I really wish to highlight based on your intervention. Thank you very much. Now our next speaker is Mr. Joshua Lincoln, who is the senior fellow at the Center for International Law and Governance at the Fletcher School, Tufts University, and visiting fellow at Kellogg College, University of Oxford. Mr. Lincoln brings deep expertise in multilateral institutions, United Nations reform, and international law, including his work on intergovernmental negotiation toward the Global Plastics Treaty. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back in Astana, and thank you to our hosts for another superbly organized event. I'm not sure what an academic can do following two distinguished senior government representatives, but I will try to bring a theoretical flavor to this morning's conversation. I understand the topic of this conference and the charge that has been put to us by our hosts as rebuilding trust by thinking together. To do so, I think we have to move beyond our individual countries, our continents, our cultures, our worldviews even. We must begin to push boundaries in the mind. And I would like to maybe offer a few thoughts in that direction. We're all agreed the 1945 global institutions today face unprecedented challenges. There's no question. The recent 80th birthday of the United Nations was exactly that, an 80th birthday. It was the grandfather's birthday rather than the 50th birthday. And as such, it was a somewhat painful reminder that the UN Charter of 1945 was in effect pre-digital, pre-nuclear, pre-AI, pre-human rights, pre-climate crisis. Under those circumstances, what to do? I think I'm these days thinking more and more about the work of Canadian IR scholar Thomas Homer Dixon, who draws on complexity theory to offer the concept of constrained breakdown, meaning moderated, slowed breakdown. And it seems to me this idea can be applied at the international level. The international system has accumulated tectonic stresses. It is increasingly unable, as we know it, to deal with a broad range of emerging global risks and threats. But this breakdown, as in climate change, as in the erosion of the trading system, as in the weakening of the WMD architecture, if this breakdown is constrained enough, if it is slowed enough to present a total collapse, it allows the possibility for renewal through breakdown, for what he calls katagenesis. If you can slow breakdown, you create the conditions for renewal. This is an interesting idea for our purposes today. This brings us to the proliferation of new multilateral arrangements. I will not list them. There are so many, the list is too long. We don't have the time. But they encompass at least two new sets of cooperative formats which we have seen in the last 25 years. But each of them has positives and each of them has negatives that I think we have to begin to take account of more truthfully. The 1945 UN and Bretton Woods institutions had a high degree of high legitimacy through near global membership and normative grounding in international law. However, their vast membership and the veto arrangements that came with them also slowed meaningful action, revealed institutional hypocrisy, and fueled frustrations around inefficiency. The two main types of new formats have their own distinctive pros and cons. The counter-institutional formations, we could give the example, we know many of them, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the CSTO, the BRICS, to take a couple examples, provide alternative governance platforms. They emphasize sovereignty, multipolarity, and resistance to Western-centric orders. They, it must be said, offer inclusive spaces for countries that are marginalized in traditional fora and shaped by different normative priorities. But beyond this posture, often the core substantive agendas are on balance weaker, and they deliberately exclude global norms. They're constrained by limited enforcement mechanisms and often weaker institutional capacity. The result is that they can deepen global divisions and foster greater cooperation themselves. Often in response, minilaterals, here we could give the example of the Quad, AUK US, I2, U2, and any number of other formations, have emerged as an institutional response to promote even more targeted cooperation and shared values among even fewer states. They allow faster decision-making, targeted cooperation on key issues, but they also exclude important stakeholders and lead to fragmentation and division. They trigger rivalry by catalyzing competing blocs rather than inclusive cooperation. Looking ahead, I think, it would like to suggest that the plethora of new multilateral formats, and specifically this dialectic between counter-institutional coalitions and minilaterals, will continue for the foreseeable future. It is the world we live in. And it will extend the work of fragmentation and breakdown, and at the same time prevent system rupture itself, at least for a time. Only the key of this logic is that only the steady worsening over time will generate the return of adequate attention back to the universal track, back to the question of the kind of change in scale and in depth that is unreachable today when we think about our 1945 institutions. This could take the form of fundamental reform of the UN Charter, a new organization, but in time, ladies and gentlemen, we will return to the universal question. This is already happening. There are increasing calls and interest in fundamental reform since UN 75, only 5 years ago. And it's evident also in the dissatisfaction that is heard quite widely around a visionless UN 80 cost-cutting reform. It's certainly a long way off, but for example, there is now an Article 109 campaign that started last month in New York. It's a civil society campaign, but it aims to build support among UN member states for reviewing the Charter under Article 109. Article 109 is interesting. It was included in the 1945 Charter as the compromise to be paid for the veto. It was meant to happen in 1955 because of the Cold War. It never happened in 1955 and has not happened since. In conclusion, we were asked, lest you think, by the way, that this is a highly theoretical idea, the leaders of India, Brazil, and South Africa have all voiced support for fundamental rethinking of the Charter under Article 109. In conclusion, my last thought, we were asked to think about the role of middle powers and regional conveners. And I think Kazakhstan offers an interesting illustration of the critical capacity that is needed in the period ahead, which is to navigate both tracks simultaneously. It is a member of the SCO, it is a member of the CSTO, it is a member of the Eurasian Union, it is even an associate member of the BRICS Plus format. But it also continues to call for norms like the sovereign equality of states, the inviolability of national boundaries, the peaceful resolution of disputes, and to push increasingly clearly for fundamental reform of the UN system. In other words, renewal through breakdown requires states to navigate the unsatisfactory and dangerous present through new multilateral formats, but in order to find ways to renew universal institutions for a more structured and satisfactory future in the end. Ahmed, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lincoln. You really added this academic and research flavor to our discussion, and I'm sure the participants will have a lot of questions when we open the question and answer session. But I was really very interested to hear from you your insights about the UN reform, which is also important for us. So thank you very much for sharing with us your insights. So we now welcome Professor Li Yongxuan, who is the head of the Scientific Council of the Institute for the Social Development of Europe and Asia under the Development Research Center of the State Council of China. His research bridges regional development and global governance, offering a valuable East Asian perspective. Dear Professor, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished friends. I'm very glad to be part of this interesting, important event. Thank you for the invitation. I will share my vision as of today on the global processes today, and some of them are related to the topic of our forum. We're facing an extremely complex international situation full of contradictions and conflicts. Relations between major powers are marked by uncertainty, and global problems such as climate change, international terrorism, regional conflicts, and others urgently require coordinated responses by the great powers. Yet those same great powers are engaged in tariff and trade wars and sanctions. Behind all these changes lies a transformation of the world order. The fate of the unipolar world is worth reconsidering. After the end of the Cold War, we experienced 30 years of a unipolar world. How was this unipolar world created? Understanding this process helps us comprehend today's global dynamics and trends. How did the bipolar world of the Cold War collapse? Initially, the bipolar world consisted of two parallel social systems developing amid competition and confrontation. Each system had its unique characteristics. The hallmark of the Western liberal development model is its focus on efficiency, while the Eastern socialist model prioritizes fairness. Excessive focus on efficiency can lead to polarization, inequality, and social instability, while excessive egalitarianism can reduce efficiency and stifle innovation. In the 1960s, Western scholars proposed the concept of convergence. However, history has shown that the predictions of convergence did not materialize. Since 1970s, several major historical developments have transformed the world, and these developments include the rapid advancement of scientific and technological revolutions, continuously creating new productive forces and alleviating problems arising from the liberal model of development. The second, the globalization process, blurred traditional boundaries, allowing capital, technology, and even labor to move relatively freely. Third, in the late 70s, China launched its policy to reform and effectively opening to the West a market of over 1 billion people. And fourth, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the transformation of Eastern Europe, and this provided the West not only with vast markets, but also eliminated a major superpower rival. And this is why the American scientist Francis Fukuyama even declared the end of history. But today we are witnessing a completely different world, which is marked by the following features. First, the rise of the largest developing country with the second largest economy, that is China, the rise of emerging market countries, BRICS, resurgence of Russia, at least in political and military terms, the continued strengths of the US and the Western Bloc, they can no longer control or monopolize the rules of economic globalization. And the fifth, the global South desires to create a world order that reflects the interests of all countries. And sixth, shared global threats and challenges can only be solved through collective action. No single country can handle them alone. And last, The middle powers have already recognized their role in the world process and global process. Leaders of major powers have provided their assessment of this international situation. Xi Jinping emphasizes that the world is undergoing unprecedented changes not seen in a century. Putin said that declared the end of the unipolar world. President Tokayev says that we have entered a complex historical period and that a new world order is emerging. I would say that it is peculiar. Today's world has a peculiarity that should focus on cooperation. We should move from unipolar to the transition from a unipolar to multipolar world will be painful, full of uncertainty, but we should control all. And the great powers should find consensus on main issues, on principal issues. Of course, you are interested in relation between China and the US. Nobody wants to see what is happening now, but I'm sure that relations will be normalized, but it will take a while. It will be sophisticated, but it will happen. We have implemented our obligations, especially when we became when we joined the WTO. At the moment, the average level of our country is that of the developed, among the developed nations. The China's average tariff level dropped to 5%, which is the average among the developed nations. Today, China is developing rapidly, and we are joining efforts with our partners. We are discussing the future world. The good example is the relations between China and Central Asia. There is a mechanism of cooperation between Asia and Central Asia and China, including SCO. I hope that sooner or later, relations between China and USA will be normalized, and hopefully we will finally be able to live in a multipolar world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. Thank you for sharing with us your insights, especially also you emphasized the fact of move from unipolar to multipolar polarity, and also emphasizing or highlighting the importance of mutual respect and cooperation. So thank you very much. So our final speaker is Charles McLean, who is the founder and managing director of Borderless Consulting Group. With experience in cross-border business and strategic advisory, he brings a private sector perspective to global cooperation and governance. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Astana Forum for inviting us to present this morning. It's an honor to be back in Astana and to address this group. I had anticipated talking a little bit about the United Nations and about the failure of multilateral institutions to address some of the huge crises that the world is facing right now, and then to talk about the role of middle powers. And I can discuss all of that. I have the unenviable task of following some experts and academics and government officials. But I would rather try to bring this up to date a little bit with some reflections on what happened recently in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think all of us probably welcome the news that the hostilities in Gaza seem to have, at least temporarily and let's hope permanently, come to a close. That kind of upended for me some of the perceptions that I that I had about the way things would work in the world. I focus here on a photograph that I saw of President Trump in the Oval Office and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as Netanyahu is on the telephone to the Prime Minister of Qatar, and he is reading an apology to the Prime Minister. This struck me as amazing, because I thought, well, is this a return of great power politics again, or is this the force of President Trump's personality, or how does this take place? And I've come back to the idea that this is really about leverage. Leverage is the key here. Does the United Nations have the leverage to bring peace? Probably not. It has a very sophisticated and uplifting charter. With due apologies to Madam Chair, I think the United Nations, as some of the speakers have said, could use some reforms. But fundamentally, I think it's a question of leverage. How do you get the leverage to really address the problems of the world, the big problems, the Gaza level problems, or the Ukraine level problems? This reminded me, and I'm take advantage of being the last speaker to kind of go off topic a little bit, but it reminded me of an old movie that I saw recently on one of those old movie channels. It was a 1951 science fiction movie, and I'm going to bore everybody and I'll spoil the movie for you and tell you a little bit about the plot. It's called The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. Has anybody besides me ever seen this movie? There you go, a few people have. Okay, well then you understand the plot of this. Essentially, if I can summarize it, a spaceship lands in Washington, D.C. A spaceman comes out of the ship and his robot. The spaceman looks exactly like regular humans, conveniently. And he manages to kind of disappear into the crowd somehow. He ends up living in a boarding house, pretending he's a regular human. And he finds a way to get introduced to the greatest scientist on Earth, presumably, who looks a lot, is played by Sam Jaffe. He looks a lot like Albert Einstein, which was how people viewed what scientists look like, I guess, in 1951. He asks the great scientist, Dr. Barnard, he says, how can I get all of the important people in the world together in one room? Because I have this address that I want to give them. I want to tell them something important. He's confided in Professor Barnard that he's the spaceman. And Professor Barnard says, that's not possible. You're never going to get the Russians to come and sit with the Americans. You're not going to get the Israelis to come and sit with the Palestinians. It's not going to happen. And the spaceman says, well, how about if I demonstrate my power, and maybe that would persuade people to come. So he devises this test, hence the name of the film, where he stops all electricity on Earth for half an hour, except in hospitals and airplanes, but cars stop, elevators stop, everything stops. And of course, people are amazed by this, and he does manage to get all of these important people in the world together in one room. And at that point, he says, listen, you folks have experimented with dynamite, and we watched from our planet, and we've seen the experiments with aircraft and bombs and that sort of thing. But now you're using nuclear weapons. That's not acceptable to us, because you could threaten other planets with that, and as a result, I'm giving you this ultimatum. if you don't abandon nuclear weapons, we are going to destroy your planet. Talk about leverage. That's leverage, okay? But my sense is that the world is stuck in the second reel of that movie. We're at the stage where Professor Barnard says to the spaceman, you're never going to be able to get the Russians and the Americans to sit down together. You're never going to get the Israelis and the Palestinians to sit down. We need the leverage. And my conclusion from that is that I guess it's unlikely the spaceman is going to come and provide that leverage for us. We're going to have to find a way to save ourselves. And I hope that the middle powers are successful in doing that, because I think it's frustrating for many of us as observers to see the great multilateral institutions try and fail. But we have reached a stage now where somebody has to step up. And our hope is that the middle powers or multilateral organizations of the future are able to do that. I'm sorry about that if I spoiled that movie for everybody, but it's really worth watching if you get a chance. The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLean. I will definitely watch that movie because it sounds very interesting. But thank you very much for highlighting the the importance of leverage. You know, when we deal with so many difficult aspects of complicated world issues, global issues. So now we have 10 minutes left until we break for a coffee. So I would like to open the floor for questions and answers. So I would like to invite you to ask questions. You can ask like a question to to panelists or specific panelists. But before doing so, please introduce yourself. Yes, please.
Thank you, dear speakers, for this kind of discussion. But I have one question. Capture of your session is rebuilding trust. But what we heard that each panelist has very own opinion about international process. But when we rebuilding trust, we need some point of compromise. And please, maybe one of the panelists will say which kind of compromise we can find in the near future, because right now there is no compromise, unfortunately, on international level. That's why we see that we have some questions to international law or something else. But what model of compromise we can build in near future, or we can build it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any volunteer?
Okay, I've been designated as the volunteer. Charles, can you... Thank you. I think that's the question. You raise it. Obviously, if it were an easy question, we wouldn't have made it the topic of the think tank forum. So we are starting the exploration in that sense. I must say, from my perspective, that's exactly right. We need new ways of understanding the moment we are in and the direction, what we are experiencing and where we are going. The idea that I was trying to suggest is that there is a breakdown, a historical, slow breakdown of the universal institutions that we've relied on for a long time. And part of that breakdown has been the emergence of a whole set of other institutions for very valid reasons, in many, many cases for very valid reasons and for very valid purposes. And they are now part of the story as well. At the same time, many of those other institutions cannot ultimately replace the problem of universality and universal legitimacy that we had somewhat solved through the original set of universal institutions, which is why, in what I was suggesting, we are in a historical period where we have to both manage. There is room for pragmatism, there is room for transactionalism, there is room for new partnerships in Central Asia, in the region, across the broad meta region, for example, to take this region as a starting point. And at the same time, we have to continue the work of building bridges and restoring and renewing and rebuilding our universal institutions. A world that is composed only of sub-regional institutions and mini-laterals is a world that will take us to fundamental breakdown. We have to find a way to navigate these tracks in parallel. And I think you've heard multiple examples today, actually, from the other speakers here, of that process. I don't think it's elegant. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's without friction. But I think you are watching the world move in that direction, slowly, painfully, with a lot of difficulty in many instances. But many of the examples that were given today actually can be understood within this overall framework. So in my mind, that is, I don't know if the compromise, the word you use, is the right approach, but I think we have to arrive at a more integrated understanding of where we are, and not perhaps a precise vision of where we're going, but at least a general direction of travel. Thank you so much.
I'd like to, if I can just add a little bit to what Josh said. To address the question of compromise, I think one of the problems is that ultimately you're asking people to compromise their principles. You're asking nations to compromise their principles. It's not really about real estate. It's about principles. And I think that the question really is, what are the ultimate priorities of people who are negotiating peace? If the priority is human life, then it's possible to compromise even on principles. But if human life is not considered the ultimate standard, then it's much more difficult to reach compromise. The United Nations was founded in 1945 after the bloodiest and most terrible war in human history. Between 50 and 75 million people lost their lives. And I think collectively the world said, never again. The value of human life was so precious, and there had been so many lives lost. The United Nations created a charter and had ambitions to bring about the kind of world peace that has been so elusive. But the compromising of principles is tough. And I think we're seeing that in the Middle East, we're seeing it in Eastern Europe, we're seeing it all over the world. But I think that is required if we value life.
I think that what has been said is very much correlating with what is happening right now. But let me just tell you something. I would like to be very honest and frank and straightforward about what you said. I think that the international politics has been always chaotic and anarchic, and this has been, as a student of international relations, I can tell you that it has been the nature and characteristics of international law. But we had one very important thing in hand, which was it was supposed to be in this way, that wars being an exception in international politics. Now it is a new norm. Everybody is trying, not everybody, but most of the countries are trying to maximizing their interest through use of naked force. So what you are calling about a compromise, I understand as a relative stability in this chaotic and anarchic situation, which needs a level of accepting a sort of principles, which is going to govern the behavior of national unities in this chaotic international politics. Right now, we are not seeing that, unfortunately. There are those who are trying to get back to the status quo. There are those who are trying to define an inclusive security arrangement, and also international arrangement. But as we are seeing, it is a slowdown breakdown, it is a rapid breakdown, whatever we call it. We are seeing a sort of collapse in different fields and in different aspects of international politics. This is why that we have to come to a sort of recognition and recognizing the legitimate interest and legitimate concerns of others to accept a sort of new order, whatever we call it, for the future. It is emerging, rapidly emerging, but we don't know exactly what will be that. What is happening right now between the United States and China on this tariff war is going to be end of this war, or is going to be the beginning of a new war. We exactly don't know. If it is going to be a sort of compromise between the United States and China, or it's going to be a sort of cold, not sort of cold war in a classic way, but a sort of accepting each other's, but not recognizing each other. These are sort of questions that we have to think very carefully about.
Couple of words. Your question was regarding the crucial issue. Your question was regarding the powers, relations between powers. We have the lack of trust between great powers. We need to reconcile, and compromise is the only way. But in order to take a compromise, you need not only wisdom, but you need the audacity. It's easy to go on war, but to find a compromise is hard. I hope we will finally reach a compromise. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, please.
My name is Daniel Sari. I'm a director of Political Studies Center at Almayu, and I would like to ask my question to Dr. Khatibzadeh. You've mentioned that there are lots of reasons, and even some states have reached an acute level of differentiation towards different countries, and there was a talk about establishing a trust between the member states. And I would like, to ask, what is the way, I don't believe that a compromise is the best solution on reaching and building trust between the member states. Is there any other methodology to reach and to establish and strengthen the trust between the member states?
Thank you very much. International politics has never been about, trust. You know that. It is, of course, trust is something that is very good if there exists between players and, actors in international politics. But the international relations has been always about recognition of each other's legitimate interests and legitimate concerns, and also agreeing on principles to govern the chaotic and anarchic nature of international politics. So I think that United Nations was the most important achievement of all human history, because it was a consensus decision by everybody that war should be an exception. The war should be something that being the last resort, and it should be done only and only under a UN and a global mandate. So I think that I don't want to suggest that we have to get back to to all the provisions that we used to work with, but I think the most important thing is to build future based on our former achievement, not just revisiting everything, because you cannot invent the tire again. You know, it is something that we have already achieved. What I am going to suggest is to work on the principles that have been already agreed upon, this normative structure which is the architect of this post-Second World War. I'm not calling this normative structure as the best that we can right now develop, but at least a base, a sort of basic, based on which we can build future. Future today is reflecting yesterday, and tomorrow is reflecting our decisions today. Today is chaotic because yesterday we were not quite, into this notion that the world is transforming. So if you are going to have a different future tomorrow, we have to make decision today, and it is not very idealistic approach. It is very realistic, and this is why that concepts such as global south, such as alternative to the hegemonic ambitions and posture by some states is very much important.
Thank you very much. So I don't see, okay, please. This will be the last question because we need to wrap the session.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hamza Balta from Institute for Advanced International Studies, Uzbekistan. Very interesting and profound ideas I heard from panelists today. So if I may summarize a little bit before my question. So Charles talked about the importance of having a leverage, and Mr. Lee talked about fairness of international relations and trust. Mr. Khatibzadeh talked about Middle East and the importance of global south, and Joshua mentioned the phrase constraint, breakdown, and moving towards our goal step by step. And Mr. Ashikbayev mentioned the importance of connecting East and West through middle corridor. So we can see multiple approaches and various perceptions of what is going on in the world today. So I'm particularly interested in the Charles point about the phone call by Mr. Trump. President Trump made Netanyahu calling Qatari Prime Minister and his personal contribution towards the solution of the problem of Middle East. Isn't it somehow drifting away from the importance of traditional the role of institutions in the world and rising role of agencies in the world? Thank you. And how it's concerning, in my understanding, that the agency-driven foreign policy or agency-driven solutions towards important questions and important problems in the world, I think it somehow, let's mildly saying, isn't it dangerous? Because we're undermining the role of institutions, and it's going to be, in my understanding, kind of whimsical and somehow drifting away from the role of institutions. Thank you.
Well, Hamza, I think that you kind of put your finger on it. I reflected on the Sharm el-Sheikh peace treaty, if it materializes, because I thought, how is this happening? How is it that for 2 years there has been intense fighting in Gaza? 65,000 people have lost their lives, in addition to the 1,200 Israelis who lost their lives 2 years ago. The United Nations tried repeatedly to solve that problem, and without success. Other multilateral institutions tried to solve the problem. And I guess the shorthand analysis was, well, through the force of personality, President Trump was able to affect this change. But I came around to the idea that it was probably the leverage that President Trump had over Prime Minister Netanyahu. Either come to the table and agree on a peace treaty, or perhaps we won't be giving you any more weapons. We won't be giving Israel any more money. That's the kind of leverage that it took, I think, to actually make that deal happen. Again, the ink is still wet on that agreement, and we don't know whether or not it will hold. But it does remind us that I think it does require sometimes great power leverage. It requires a Xi or a Putin or a Trump to step up and say, well, here are the consequences if you don't abide by, reach an agreement for peace. We'll see if that pertains with Ukraine, which is now obviously the important geopolitical crisis that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. So with this, I would like to conclude our session, which was about multilateralism. And first of all, I would like to thank all our speakers. I've started losing some of them, so but one round of applause to our speakers, because it was really, really interesting. And let me say just very few words, because again, our speakers really shared with us many interesting perspectives when it comes to a topic of multilateralism, and especially reforming global governance in such a divided world. So I think we would all agree that, and also some of the speakers spoke more about this, is the role of middle powers, because again, why we have this discussion in Kazakhstan, because we hope that, countries like Kazakhstan could bring and could contribute the meaningful role in the discussion when it comes to tackling with global issues. So the role of middle powers is very important. But also, I think all speakers, if not, but most of the speakers referred to the reform of the United Nations, because you also spoke, right? Because in this such a conflict, in this type of conflict situations and divided world, where is the UN, But as a resident coordinator representing the United Nations in Kazakhstan, I would say, like from myself and also my colleagues would agree that the member states established this institution, right? So 1945, all nations come together, and by establishing this institution, also member states took the responsibility. So in that sense, so the reform is also lies a lot on member states. It's not only about the United Nations as institution, but also a lot should come from member states, in terms of how we should proceed with this reform, what we want to see as how to say, reformed UN. And also the speakers referred to the importance of the principles of international law and also humanitarian law. Also the Global South. So more and more now the countries from Global South actively and meaningfully participating in global dialogue. I think this should be really like more promoted and supported. Last but not least, all dialogues need to be inclusive. We need to bring together multiple stakeholders when it comes to discussing very difficult issues, such as also what's happening now globally in terms of war conflicts, because we obviously, like also you referred, one of the speakers said, it's not only great powers, but mini and middle powers. So with this, like the dialogue should include all related relevant stakeholders. So with this, I would like to again thank all the speakers, and let me conclude this session. But before you run for a coffee, I would like to also invite you to this side event on the presentation of the Insight Central Asia Digital Platform.